Chapter 9 The Court. We arrived to the Spring Valley Police Department and they seated me in an interview room. "Honey, do you have drugs on you?" the lady police officer asked me as I was crying. "Why in the world would I have such things?" I asked in an insulted disbelief and in a piqued tone. "Honey, don't take this personally. It is just a procedure," she explained with a soothing and comforting voice. Then, after some while, they asked me to get up and take fingerprints through some machine, and they took off the handcuffs from me. "Why are you taking my fingerprints?" I asked as I was wiping my tears with the other hand. The police officer that arrested me jokingly asked, "What, you have never been arrested before?" "Is this supposed to be a casual thing in your society?" I asked in bewilderment, looking straight into the officer's face. "Not that big of a deal as you make of it," he comforted. "Now, what is your social security number?" "Sir, I don't have a social security number. I'm undocumented," I explained unabashedly. The officer was silent and then asked, "How do you spell your full name, young lady?" I spelled out the letters of my infamous name, prepared for anything to happen. It was not my legal name, and I forgot that it wasn't, but that was the name I went by. Then they took my heavily laden picture and put back my handcuffs on me. After that procedure, we went to some other place. "What now? Am I going to jail?" I nervously asked. "Don't you see we're passing the jail cells? We are going to see the judge." The police officer that arrested me said it in the most casual and calm tone. My entire body was shaking, and I was sweating as I never had a chance to see what a judge looked like in my entire life. We came to the courtroom. There was some other lady in front of the judge for a DUI charge as she stood behind the defense podium. And after the judge gave his verdict to her, it was my turn to take her place behind that podium while she was escorted outside. The police officer that arrested me approached the podium, placed my paperwork on it, and moved aside. While I was physically present in the room, my mind was levitating to all kinds of directions in hopes of escaping what was to come. And my palms were extremely sweaty. The judge introduced himself as Judge Simon, and his first question was whether I spoke English or not. Quaveringly, I said yes. Then he started quickly reciting a long list of my rights, which out of nervousness, I didn't understand the thing. But after he was done, he asked me, "Do you understand?" "Yes," I uttered in hesitation as I gingerly massaged my sweaty, handcuffed hands behind me to find a way to calm myself and my outrageously palpitating heartbeat. Then he asked a question that sounded to me as follows. "Did you bite your grandmother?" I didn't think twice about the question, and I promptly answered as I enunciated every syllable of that sentence. "I did bite my grandma," while transfixing my gaze on Judge Simon in a paralyzed stand. The entire crowd was dead silent, and Judge Simon looked at me questioningly as his mouth was open, seeming completely confused. I continued staring at him with the ultimate nervousness. Then he shook himself from his confused stupor, summoned 6 people that were beside me towards his podium, and said, "I don't want to put this girl in jail, and I don't want to throw her onto the streets. Those words sounded very comforting to me. "I appoint you as her public defender." He pointed at some men out of the 6 people. "Talk to her, find her a place to temporarily live, tell me what the situation entails, and we will proceed from there. Understood?" The public defender approached my podium, grabbed my paperwork where I saw his finger on my age number, 16. He whispered under his breath next to me, "You are only 16? He sounded discomforted. Then he collected himself upright, looked up at Judge Simon, who patiently waited for a reciprocating response, and loudly exclaimed, "Understood." I was brought back to an interview room with the police officer that arrested me, and he gently took off my handcuffs. I fumbled my wrists in a sense of ease. "What happened?" I asked. Why was Judge Simon so confused when I answered his question if I bit my grandma? Girl, you incriminated yourself, and your answer was irrelevant to his question. You heard it wrong. What he simply did was say your grandma's name and ask you if she was in fact your grandma, and you didn't only confirm that she was your grandma, but you right away jumped into confessing that you bit her. We don't even have clear evidence that you in fact bit her, which was prematurely done on your part as you confessed. And that was what caught Judge Simon off guard and all of us, to be honest with you, the police officer explained. With such nervousness, I didn't even hear the judge pronouncing Grandma's name. I clearly heard the question that I thought I answered. I was not going to lie to Judge Simon. It did happen. After the police officer explained that to me, he made some calls to Child Protective Services. And meanwhile, the appointed public defender came to talk to me. I explained everything that happened to me and in front of the police officer that arrested me, that I wasn't my grandmother's aggressor and that the bite was in fact out of panic and in defense. I also told him that I was taking AP class in school and that I was not known to be a troublemaker. The public defender was religiously taking notes while I described the entire situation. Then he asked me, do you have other relatives that you can live with, like an aunt or something, because you can't return to your grandma for quite some time? I smirked in silence at the mention of my aunt. The police officer chuckled and answered this question. Her aunt is the one that turned her in, John. She definitely can't live with her either. My public defender made a long sigh, immersing himself in thought, and then he looked up at me and said, okay, we will find you a place to temporarily live until we will officially decide where you would go next. After another while, a Child Protective Services social worker came, who introduced herself as Jamie, with another lady who introduced herself as Jessie. Jessie explained to me that I was going to be in a runaway and homeless youth shelter and that Jamie was going to find me a more permanent place to live within a month. I only asked that they promised me a place to live where I would not be harmed, and Jessie promised me. After I was explaining the particulars, I had to face Judge Simon again without handcuffs this time. Before I talked to Judge Simon, the public defender warned me not to say a word and that he was going to talk for me. Does the girl have a place to go? Judge Simon broke the silence. Yes, she is going to a runaway and homeless youth shelter for a month until we determine where she would stay next, the public defender explained. I'm issuing a restraining order against her for her grandma for 6 months. Make sure that she signs the paperwork. We will reconvene on August 30th, 2007 with more definite solutions. Do you have any final questions? Judge Simon asked. May the record of her allegations be sealed, Your Honor, my public defender asked. The record may be definitely sealed due to the nature of her circumstances, Judge Simon concluded, and he said with final authority, the court is adjourned. He slammed his hammer. We got out of the courtroom and I was presented with a contract of the restraining order issued against me for my grandma. I ceremoniously scribbled my name as if it was a document of freedom, got a copy of it, and was set on my way to Nanuet, where the homeless and runaway youth shelter is. All of a sudden, I coincidentally remembered my friend Keisha from freshman year, that was where she had the opportunity to stay and recuperate from her troubles. Hey, I broke the silence as we were driving to my new temporary home. Yes, Alina, Jessie answered. Do you remember Keisha, the African-American girl that was in that house last year? I asked curiously. Yeah, she was a masterpiece, Jessie put it frankly. That's when I knew that I was going to the right temporary habitat.